The ideas expressed in the following presentations are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of ACI or its committees. ACI web sessions are recorded at ACI conventions or other concrete industry events and will be made available for viewing free of charge for 1 week. Thereafter, they will be archived on the ACI website or added to ACI's online CEU program, depending on their content. You can earn continuing education credits through ACI's online CEU program. Visit www.concrete.org to register. ACI conventions provide an opportunity for networking and for keeping up to date with the latest in concrete technology and practices.
And now we move to the last, but certainly not least, presentation by Professor Shunsuke Otani, who is certainly one of the leading researchers on earthquake engineering and structural concrete in the world. And I would like to thank particularly and take the opportunity to thank Professor Otani for coming from Japan, but also to thank several of the speakers that came from overseas, from Germany, Japan, Switzerland, Turkey, and so this is the case for Professor Otani, who came from Japan. Professor Otani is going to be speaking on the lessons learned from the 2011 Tohoku, Japan earthquake.
Thank you, Sergio. And first I have to say, Jim and Mario, it is great for us to know you for a long time, and also Jim's sincere friendship and established leadership was very good, useful for ACI, JCI research cooperation on seismic strengthening. I have to mention two things. First, this is 7:30 in the morning in Tokyo, and my mind is not working properly. Second, I left the English-speaking part of the world 30 years ago, and my language may not be good. Okay, anyway, what I want to talk about, that is this lesson learned from the 2011 or last year's Tohoku, Japan earthquake. This shows the cross-section in the Pacific, off east coast of Japan. Pacific plate goes under continental plate, and this continental plate carries the island of Japan. And this boundary part is called Japan Trench. And this Pacific plate moves at the rate of 8 centimeters annually. 8 centimeters a year. How fast is it? That rate is the same as growth of your fingernail. That is the speed this Pacific plate moves. And once rebound of the continental plate occurs, then there is uprise of the plate, and this pushes the seawater upward, causing tsunami. And observed or estimated movement, this plate here is 50 meters. This plate moves at the rate of 8 centimeters per year, and this movement is 50 meters. That means the strain energy stored over 600 years was released by this rebound of the continental plate. 600 years. And headquarters for earthquake research promotion, a part of Japanese government, studied the historical records of earthquakes over 500 years, and then estimated the 30-year probability of earthquake occurrence at different regions. On the basis of the historical study, earthquake occurs in these subdivided regions separately, not combined, but separately. And for example, at Miyagi Prefecture offshore, then magnitude of 7.5 earthquake, that probability occurrence in 40 years, that is 99%. Actually, in this region, earthquake of magnitude 7.5 or in this range occurs almost every 30 to 40 years. And last earthquake occurred in 1978. So earthquake can occur at any moment. Unfortunately, this was not true. This is what happened this time. Magnitude was 9. This is about 240 times as large as, energy released was 240 times compared to the predicted or estimated earthquake energy of magnitude 7.5. This distance was 200 kilometers, 500 kilometers, and fracture of or slippage of the boundary plates occurred of course, of Iwate, Miyagi, Fukushima, Ibaraki. So, this was not predicted by seismologists at all. State of the art of seismology is not good enough to predict the location, magnitude, time of such earthquake. Nobody predicted, no seismologist predicted this earthquake to occur. So this is lesson number 1. State of the art in seismology, this is not good enough. About tsunami, then let me define these terms. First, run-up height, that is the maximum height from the tidal level where the water reached. And inundation height, that is the maximum water level measured from the tidal level. And then inundation depth, that is the height of the water level from the ground. Actually, this is most important for us. And this was the measured run-up height and also inundation height measured from the sea level. And maximum inundation height reached 37 meters in Miyako, in this area. 20 meters inundation height. That is almost the height of the 5 to 6 story building. But unfortunately, this is not measured from the sea level, not from the ground. But anyway, tsunami height was quite high. This slide shows the casualties from this earthquake. Tsunami hit the Iwate, Miyagi, Fukushima, and the death rate was quite high in those 3 prefectures. The rate of people died by drowning, that is almost 90% in these 3 prefectures, and excluding those people who are still missing. So this disaster, this is tsunami disaster rather than disaster caused by ground shaking. This building, steel structure, 3 stories high. This is actually disaster control office building in one town. Disaster control office building, so many people evacuated to this building. And actually 57 people came to this building for escape, and only 10 people survived. This entire building was buried under the water. And some people just hang to the exterior staircase and could survive. but others, they were just drowned and killed. So, as a structural engineer, what can you do? Structure is to provide space for building use, and including the protection of occupants' life. But once building is buried under the water, what can you do as a structural engineer? I don't think you can do anything. Just to provide people to escape to higher places on the hill or in higher buildings. And we need assistance from the community planning people rather than structural engineers. This is the hotel building in reinforced concrete. You don't see any structural damage. But once you go inside, then non-structural elements, partitions, ceilings, and also mechanical facilities, they are all destroyed. And cost of those non-structural elements, that is more than cost of structural system. So actually, this building looks very nice, but was turned down, demolished. Houses, this is the damage caused by tsunami and washed away by tsunami flood. This is after removal of the washed away houses in flat land. So no houses here anymore. But if houses are built in higher place, then they could remain. They could survive. But if they were built on lower land, then these houses were all washed away. People suggested that all the villages should be moved to higher places. That is a good idea, but Japan is the society of old people. This place is close to the harbor, and many people lives on fishing. And if elderly people like myself goes to the harbor, spending 20 minutes, half an hour every morning or every afternoon, that is too much for people. And same is true for farmers in this region. You might say, why don't you just use cars to go to harbor? That is good idea in United States, but not in Japan. Cost of fuel, that is very expensive in Japan. And those fishermen have difficulty buying fuels for fishing boats. So moving village to higher land, that is not a solution. In this slide, this building here, this is a hospital building, 4 stories high. Water came to 3 stories, and patients were moved to the 4th story and also to the roof level, and they could survive. But after tsunami, water is gone, then they cannot do any medical treatment in this hospital. The facilities for the infants, elderly people, sick people, hospitals, schools, those should be placed in higher land. Not residential, but these important facilities, especially for the weak, should be placed in the higher land. And you can take your children to higher land every morning by car, but this is quite important to protect the weak people from the tsunami. And just looking at this slide, you will see those buildings standing. That is either steel construction or reinforced construction. Their structure is very strong against tsunami. So you can use these reinforced concrete buildings for tsunami evacuation facilities. You can arrange the contract between local government and owner of the building, and let the owner of the building accept the refugees during the tsunami event. What happened to this bus? Question is, what can we control the floating, dangerous floating objects like this bus here? If this bus hits our building, certainly that will cause damage to the building. Can we change all the cars in parking lots? I don't think that is practical. What can we do? I have no idea for the solution. But we have to do something. Damage to structural walls. Structural walls are designed to resist in-plane shears, but not out-of-plane water pressure. And this 30 centimeter deep walls were damaged by tsunami. Doubly reinforced, 30 centimeter, 1 foot deep structural wall that was damaged. Overturning of this in particular case, 4-story steel construction. This was overturned after buried under the water. And if you look at this place here, then this is 7-meter deep pile that was just pulled out and the structure was overturned. This can happen in the case of tsunami. This is a school building and this is second floor slab. This was lifted by or pushed upward by tsunami pressure. This can happen. Japan Meteorological Agency issues the seismic intensity distribution throughout the country, normally after 3 minutes after an earthquake. In this case, it took 6 minutes, but it shows the distribution of strong ground shaking. This information is very important for central government to arrange or identify disaster area, or for a local government to prepare disaster measures, countermeasures. And Japanese seismic intensity scale varies from 1 to 7. And highest seismic intensity was observed at that location. Highest. Let me show you the ground motion observed by National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention. This is normally known as NEED. And it has an array of more than 1,000 stations throughout the country. And whenever they record strong motion acceleration or velocity records, then they just publish them for use by researchers, any researchers. Maximum acceleration was almost, peak ground acceleration was almost 3G. More than 10 stations recorded PGA more than 1G. Very important thing to note, that is duration of this strong ground shaking, that lasted almost 2 minutes or close to 3 minutes. Very, very long, strong ground shaking. But if we look at the velocity response spectrum from this particular earthquake, 3 stations, against the 2 earthquake records obtained during the 1995 Kobe earthquake. Last year's earthquake has a very large peak in short period region, whereas Kobe record shows very large amplitudes in longer period range. Natural period of reinforced concrete may be in this region here, or timber buildings in this region. Kobe earthquake is more destructive to reinforced concrete or timber buildings. The effect of last year's earthquake was not so large on structural failure. So the disaster was not by structural failure, but by tsunami. Let me briefly mention the Japanese the history of the seismic design codes. there was significant change in 1971, and tie spacing, minimum tie spacing was required to be less than 100 millimeter. And there was another significant change in 1981. So performance of pre-1971 or between 71 and 81 or post-81, performance of buildings were quite different. This slide, this is from Kobe earthquake disaster, but this shows the different damage level depending on the construction age. Pre-1971, then this heavy damage to collapse, this ratio is about 20%. In between 71 to 81, then this may be 15%. Post-81, then this ratio may be about 7%. So with the development of technology or improvement of seismic design codes, then ratio of damage decreased. And this is very important. And this is, if a building is found defective to earthquake ground shaking, then this is typical way of retrofitting structure. Our building normally fail, and our column normally fails in shear at very small deflection, maybe 0.5% or 0.2% story drift. In order to prevent shear failure in columns, then we have to put stiffness to a structure rather than deformation capability. So this is the typical way to strengthen an existing building. Unfortunately, this elementary school was buried under the water by tsunami water. This slide shows the damage of retrofitted or unretrofitted building in Miyagi Prefecture, where the 30-year probability of earthquake of magnitude 7.5, that was 99%. So Miyagi Prefecture government promoted the seismic vulnerability assessment as well as retrofitting. Pre-1971 stock, then these are buildings not retrofitted, and then there were 10 buildings. 4 buildings suffered very large damage, but there was not much damage in remaining 6 buildings. But this is without any retrofit work. Retrofitted work, then only 1 building out of 56 suffered medium damage. Construction between 72 to 81, then unretrofitted building suffered damage, but the retrofitted building suffered very small damage. I think this is very important, and Greg mentioned the construction age, but there's significant improvement in technology with time. And old buildings are susceptible to earthquake damage, and we have to strengthen these buildings. And if they are retrofitted, then you can see significant improvement. There was 17 unretrofitted buildings, but retrofitted buildings was more than 200. This makes the difference, although ground shaking was not so large. So seismic vulnerability assessment and retrofit are important for disaster mitigation, although ground motion in this particular case was not so destructive. And this is the damage of pre-1981 high school buildings. This was built in 1973, but this was not retrofitted yet. This is in Fukushima Prefecture, and that caused this damage. Dr. Sugano showed this damage of this building, Tohoku University building, and this building suffered some damage in 1978 Miyagi-Ken Noki earthquake. And they retrofitted this part of the building in 2001. Actually, they replaced the structure wall above 4 stories. There was a shear cracks in these structure walls, so they replaced them. But the failure occurred at the base of the second story. And when they removed the concrete in this region, then they observed fracture of longitudinal reinforcement by this particular earthquake. So they did not recognize that damage when they retrofitted this building. Summary, state-of-the-art in seismology, this is not sufficient at this stage. Second, tsunami was a major cause of the last year's disaster. 3, a far-field earthquake may not be as destructive as near-field earthquake. Now finally, seismic vulnerability assessment and retrofit. This is very important to mitigate disaster. Jim and Marion, it is too early for Jim to retire, but I hope you will enjoy life with good health. Thank you very much.
Sir. In 1978, that building did not suffer heavy damage, the university building.
No, actually, there was a shear cracks in structural walls.
Correct.
And 1G was measured in the top story, yes.
Right. Well, why do you think it suffered such heavy damage this time? Do you have any hypothesis?
No, probably they strengthened the upper part of the building. But that is structural wall, so overturning moment is higher at the base of the third floor. So, and in order to resist the overturning moment, then there was not sufficient longitudinal reinforcement in boundary columns. So it was already damaged or weakened. And retrofit did not contribute much to resist overturning moment.
Forgive me for continuing, but they replaced the walls at the level where the failure occurred.
No, they replaced the walls above fourth floor, but damage occurred at the base of third floor.